Hello. Let's see. Okay, so we are gonna write some documentation. Sorry about that. But it's gonna just help wrapping up like the pivoting we've been doing on impact. Oh my god, what a journey this has been. Um, but everything that we streamed yesterday, like implementing this concept of using, like guaranteeing the execution of state management in a component in terms of like it should only execute if the component is actually going to mount, so that if you need to clean it up, you're also guaranteed that you will have a hook for unmount. Like, it's such a fundamental concept. And for most components, like most components are stateless, right? Or at least um, they don't have to instantiate something during rendering that needs to be cleaned up as it unmounts, right? But sometimes you do need that, and it's not only about it's not only about actually needing that. It's also how you write your code. Like, what's a natural way of writing code? And let's see. I'm gonna run the dev server for the docs here. Is this the what the hell is this? Oh, yeah, that's something else. So yarn docs dev. So I'm just gonna read. I think what I just wrote kind of sums up everything. Let's just close everything here. By the way, I had an amazing experience yesterday because there was a challenge. Let's see. Maybe I can summarize it quickly. So the thing is that with the strategy we use now, where we actually only mount the component, or we only like render out the component when the component is going to be committed. Like, we kind of instantiate the component during the commit phase instead of the render phase. That has a small, that has a tiny cost, but that tiny cost is so overwhelmingly worth it because nobody's gonna notice anything in the app. It's not that big of a cost. Um, and it just gives you this natural way of writing state management for components. But anyways, related to that, there's this thing called server-side rendering. So server-side rendering happens in the render phase, right? But when you get to the client, you want to do it in the commit phase. So that means that when it runs on the server, we actually render component during the render phase. When it hits the client, we also need to run it during the render phase to match up the HTML, right? But at that point, we're guaranteed that the component will mount. So that's fine. But I wasn't sure, how do we know this specific scenario? When do we know specifically when React is going to hydrate? And specifically, how does the components know that they're being hydrated from the server? So I freaking asked ChatGPT, the new model, about this. And I just asked it, how could I detect in a React component that it's being hydrated from the server? And basically what it said first, I wish I could show you this. I'm not sure how I can show it to you. Does it sync up the questions? Oh, it does. Amazing. Okay, so we can actually look at it. Sorry. So how could I detect? I don't know if you can, how well you can see this. Can I zoom in? Zoom. That didn't do anything. Yeah, you can't really zoom this. Maybe I can. Can I just do this? Oh, whatever. So in React, you can detect that a component is being hydrated from the server by utilizing use effect, right? This is what we know from. This is a very common thing to do. We basically we render out so it's not used this way, but it's used like is client, right? So you can do that, and then blah blah blah, how it works, caveat, summary, everything. And then I write, that makes sense, but this assumes that all components are initially hydrating. That is not true. Only the first components rendered from the server are hydrated. Any way to detect that? And then it's thinking for 37 seconds, but you bring up an excellent point. Not all components are initially hydrated because only those rendered are subject to hydration, blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, React does not provide a built-in mechanism, which is interesting. Like, this is the first time I've actually felt like I've asked something that's so novel that it requires understanding of React to understand how to solve it, because there is no built-in mechanism, right? Maybe that someone has written about this and that's where you're kind of extracting it from, but it's a very novel thing. I feel like regardless, however, you can implement a custom solution to achieve this by leveraging React's context API. So what it's saying is like, okay, just create a context that says true, and then these components, they can consume this context, and it starts true, right? And then it just flips to false as it's actually up and running. And then any other future component, it will be false. The only thing it's not doing here is that it's actually using state, so it kind of reconciles all the components again, while my implementation uses a ref, because we don't actually need to reconcile or update the context value. We just need a reference to the hydration state. And that's a very clever solution. And it also had other things like use ref to access the DOM node so that you can look to see if it has like a data React route to see if it actually has, which is also very interesting. I don't know if this would actually work, because this is a use effect, and you want to know, you want to know on the first render. Well, in my case, I would want to know that, I think. Anyways, my point is that it's amazing what it was able to output here for inspiration and consideration. Like in this, I just want to show that. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna look at what I've been writing, and I'm gonna change a little bit here, because we're not gonna do this. I'm not gonna put the article. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with this article. I think I'm gonna make it something else, like write it on Medium or something. I'm not gonna make it part of the actual docs. I don't think that makes sense. But we can keep it there for now, and then just give me a second. I just want to update that as I'm talking about it. Oh, it's not here, it's in index. So we're just gonna say learn here, and then do learn. And then let's just move back to guides. And in learn, it's the same stuff. Like it's going through closures, props, context. Like it basically talks mostly about performance issues, but mostly about performance issues. But when we go to going reactive, and I think this is a really good way to explain why reactive is good. So the two challenges with React we're trying to solve is performance and mental overhead. Since performance is something we implicitly gain by doing reactive state management, let us rather focus on how we write and think reactive state management. The simplest example of state management is a counter. So we have a counter and we have some reactive state and we change the count. If we were to express this in React, we would basically do something that looks exceptionally similar. Even though this code looks the same, it executes very different. In React, the counter is called every time the component potentially needs to reconcile. in reactive code, the counter is only called once when the component initializes. That means you avoid the overhead of how useState and setCount behaves in this special runtime of reconciliation. The complexity increases as you start managing side effects. Here showing the reactive code. So here we just have an interval, and on will unmount, we clear that interval. And with React, we express it very differently, right? So yeah, I'm just gonna show it. So here we need to do a use effect where we actually create the interval, and then we have to clean up that interval. Even though our mental model is when this component mounts, create the interval. When it unmounts, clear the interval. You can't, yeah, we're gonna get to that. But you don't express it that way, right? You just have this generic effect, and you have no idea how many times it's gonna run. It might run multiple times, I should say. So what we wanted to express is an interval that updates the count every second when the component... oh, yeah, let's change that. That was a little bit weird. Updates the... right, is an interval that is created when the component mounts. The interval updates the count. Okay, what we wanted to express is an interval that is created when the component mounts. The interval updates the count every second and is cleared when the component unmounts. Sorry. What we wanted to express is an interval that is created when the component mounts. The interval updates the count every second and is cleared when the component unmounts. With reactive code, we can express exactly that. But in React, there is no such thing as mount and unmount. The reason is it's concurrent rendering. You just have a generic use effect you have to try to squeeze your mental model into. Also changing how to use setCount, as the count in this context is stale. So notice that now we had to use this other signature for setCount because count is stale, something that we have to like reason about. But this is the point. Like, you can't express things the way you think about it in React in terms of state management. You can express user interfaces the way you think about it, even though you have this function that it's called again and again. Your mental model of how the user interface updates fits that execution, right? You just describe how it's going to look at any point in time, and then React ensures that happens. Like, it just calls the function again when it needs to verify the changes. It makes so much sense. But here, it makes absolutely no sense for state management. Let us continue by creating an instance as the component mounts and then dispose of it when the component unmounts. Instance. Creating an instance of something as the component mounts and then dispose of it when the component unmounts. So in a reactor world, you would just instantiate something, and then when it will unmount, you dispose of it. Exactly what you want to express. With React, this is the closest we get. So you can do a use state. You need to use the callback so that you only instantiate it once. And then you get something here. And then you use a use effect where you don't do anything in the effect, but you return a disposer where it actually disposes of the thing. But the problem is that this won't actually work. You cannot even do this in React currently because of concurrent mode. So I'm not saying concurrent mode is bad. I'm just stating that we can do state management in a natural way in React because of concurrent mode, which is why impact exists. So, but this does not actually work in React. The reason is concurrent mode. This component might initialize and be disposed by React without running the effects. Also, during strict mode, the use state is called twice. That means you have a leak. The value proposition of impact is that you can keep the reconciling, that you will keep the reconciling model to express user interfaces. What makes React so great? For state management, you will rather use a reactive model, which gives you performance out of the box and keeps you sane expressing complex state management. Yeah, this is the thing. This is what I've always been after, like a natural way to do state management in React. Like this could have been, if you think about when React chose to go with hooks, like there's absolutely like I'm saying that all hooks are bad. Not all hooks are bad. So if you're just doing like state synchronization, like you kind of have the count and you just want to show the count and you want to increase the count, like we see here, that this is state synchronization. This isn't state management, the way I use the terms. That's fine. And when you think about hooks like these new hooks, like use deferred value, use transition, stuff like that, that makes a lot of sense. But those doesn't change your mental model of state management. Those are just features of a component. It's specific to a component. It's not about like general state management. So what I would like, talking about like this path, is like, it would be so interesting if React just did reactive state management and had primitives for doing that and a signature for components to do that. And then it could still use hooks for things that are specific to the actual user interfaces. But that's basically what Impact does. It's kind of taking that point in time of introducing hooks and stating that, okay, for state management, the hooks has just completely broken our intuition about how to do state management in React. Let's do this other thing that doesn't break our intuition. And then, okay, you can still use the use hook. You can still consume contexts. You can still use transition, use deferred value, like use ref, whatever that makes sense for like reconciling UIs. But when it comes to state management, you use this reactive paradigm. So reactive components. Let us get back to our counter and see how you would normally make it stateful. The great thing about hooks is that the fact that we can still embrace the component as a function. So yeah, like I think it needs a lot of iteration, this documentation, because I'm kind of waving, like I've iterated on this like 100 times now. And it's kind of waving back and forward on, oh, but this is great about hooks and this is bad about and then reconciliation and everything. I really want the message to be clear. But it's been hard for me to figure out what the problem is and how to actually, like, one thing is it's like building an API that actually, because the problem is like it's breaking your intuition and mental model on state management. That's the thing. And that's such an abstract problem. And how do you solve that? How do you solve, like, what even is, what is even breaking your intuition? Like, what is the thing that's breaking it? It's so hard to get to the core of that. But what I've found through my journey is like, it's basically how your code executes. Like, it sounds so simple, but that's the thing. Like, you have this built-in intuition as a programmer on how to implement state management. Like, code is very much state, well, it depends on what you're doing, of course. But at least as a UI engineer, or you're going to build UIs, you have to manage state. And you have this intuition on how to express that. And that is just completely broken in React. And then the question is, how do you build something that retains that intuition and mental model of doing state management without kind of creating these like two separate worlds? That you're still building components, but it's just, there's a different way of expressing that state management. But yeah, it's because I think like you want to keep the component model, right? Having like these state stores global, like wherever they live, globally or wherever, like you don't need these concepts at all in a framework if you actually handle state management within the components in a reactive way, because you need the performance, right? That's the thing. Like, even though Vue has its global, I think it's called Pinya or something, you don't need it. It's kind of like a convenience API. Yeah, it's nothing more than a convenience API. And that's what I wish for React. I want the React component to be scalable in terms of state management. Because it's like React scales so well for user interfaces. You can just, at any point, you can just split it up, right? Into smaller pieces and then compose it together. But that's not how you think about state management. It's not about splitting up a lot of small pieces and composing it in different ways. It's a very specific, coherent, co-located piece of code. And that's exactly what causes a problem with React. It's when you do that co-location of state high up in your component tree. Like, that is the problem. But that's exactly what you want for state management, because you want to share that state with multiple components, maybe even across the whole application, right? Sorry, I'm just reflecting out loud here. But if you're able to put a concept within a component that scales, well, basically, which scales, then you're golden. Then it's like, it doesn't matter where you put the state management. It's just gonna work. If you put the state management isolated with the UI of the component, or you choose to expose it to like a whole feature of components, or a whole page or the whole app, it doesn't matter. It's just a component that's called app. It's a component that's called dashboard page. It's a component that's called foo feature. You just expose the state of that component to the rest of the children. That's the only thing you have to think about. And it, yeah, without affecting performance at all. Yeah. Anyways, let us get back to our counter and see how you would normally make it stateful. The great thing about hooks is the fact that we can still embrace the components as a function, but that gain can bring with it so much pain as your state management becomes more than just syncing values with the user interface. And this is kind of the point I made on the previous page, so that's kind of nice to reiterate that. Instead of hooks, we're going to bring back an all React API with a new signature, create component. So this is where it differs. One thing though is, yeah, I don't think it matters. And now the function has a reactive scope where we do state management, and it returns a reconciling scope where we describe the user interface. The reactive scope runs once when the component initializes. The return function for the user interface will run every time the observed state and or props change. Reactive components. Oh, is it here? Yeah. In a reactive component, you cannot use hooks. And the reason you cannot use hooks, like it's funny because we implement the reactive component with hooks actually, but you can't use hooks in the reactive component. And that's because it only initializes the component in the commit phase, while hooks are being evaluated in the render phase. So, but that's perfectly fine. That's the whole point, right? That here you do state management. And if you need to do things like use deferred value, or you need to do like using the use hook or whatever, that's something you would do in a normal component. You cannot use hooks. This is because it guarantees to be initialized in React's commit phase as this this is because the component initializes in React's commit phase, as opposed to the render phase where hooks are evaluated. But this fact guarantees that the component will mount and unmount. Mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks. But you do not need hooks in a reactive component. You have your reactive state management. You have your reactive state management. The majority. So the thing is, when you do this, I don't want this to come off as you will start defining all your components this way. The point is that you will have like a few components that are reactive components that does state management, and so you will have an overwhelming amount of like just plain old components, function components. But it's like adding controllers, right? If you think about how we built UIs in the old days with Backbone and Knockout and AngularJS and all of this, we had controllers. So we would set points of state management through the UI, and then any nested component could like use that state management. And that's basically what we're doing here. I would imagine like even having like 10 nested levels of state management, that's starts sounding like iffy to me. That doesn't, I don't think that would be an intuitive thing to do, because you want to co-locate it. You want like specific points of doing state management in your UI. But you do not need hooks in a reactive component. You have your reactive components are designed are more controllers, as you know them from act more. I'm just going to write this down and then we'll see where it ends up. Reactive components act more like controllers. You will have a few of them. You will use them when you need to scope state management to a specific feature, page, or even the whole application. Page or even the whole application. The point is, so the point is that when you think about, oh, we need some state here, or you kind of go to, we need a use state here. No, you don't want a use state. What you want to do is think about what do I need to provide state for here, and then you then you go and find a place for it. So for example, if you have some form that has a lot of state management, well, you create a form component, right? And that's a reactive component, and that does the state management for that form. But you might have many different components for buttons and inputs and everything, and so on. Even for like maybe you have a list, and within each list item you may be able to toggle something. What you would rather do is, okay, I have this list that does state management. I'm going to create in the list component, I'm going to make that a reactive component and control the state of this list feature, whatever. Yeah. How to express that? Reactive components act more like controllers. You will use them when you need to scope state management to a specific feature, page, or the whole application. Whenever you feel the need for a use state, think about how should I put this? In a component, rather think about what feature that state belongs to, and implement that feature as a reactive component. This was a little bit weird, but I just want to write something now. I haven't really thought about this. Like like with impact and having these reactive contexts, it was more like you choose specific points in your component tree where you like inject some reactive state, as opposed to just having global state. But here you can technically make any component stateful, but it's not intended to replace useState in that sense, right? So what very often happens when you have this component-focused state management is maybe you have like a tab or an item in a list, and then you like toggle or change the UI, and then the state gets lost, right? You lose when you have that mental model of doing state management, you very quickly lose state that you wanted to keep. But the idea here is that you lift your state up into this high-performing reactive context instead. And then your state is never lost. You can move between tabs, you can move between items. It will always remember the state of the last item and so on, because it's just the state management is part of the feature. Maybe that's a good way to think about it. Like hooks is for components, state, well, how should I put it? Yeah, how should I put it? I don't know. We'll just continue. In a reactive component, you cannot use hooks. This is because the component initializes in React's commit phase, as opposed to the render phase, where hooks are evaluated. But this fact guarantees that component will mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks. Reactive components act. Think of reactive. I think I should know. Think of reactive components more as components representing features as opposed to single UI elements. Yes. As components representing features as opposed to, for example, the whole application, a specific page, a specific feature, or some very complicated UI piece of UI. Well, I think it's enough to just say that. Representing features as opposed to single UI elements. That means when you think useState, or how should I put it? Think of reactive components as components representing features. Features of a user interface as opposed to yeah, I'm just trying to find the right terms, because this is definitely how I think about it. When I look at some UI, like even VS Code here, like what are the features I'm looking at? What is like the state management here? I don't think about this tab as having its own state management, right? That's just a piece of UI. The feature here is like tabs, right? And then it depends what should be able to open these tabs. If that is like something in, I don't know, whatever menu up here or to the right, or even like from this menu, that determines where that state lives, right? So anything can access opening tabs. And that's what I mean. When you think about use state, you have a tendency to think about as this as you go as local as possible to the thing that uses the state. But here we don't do that. Here we think about a reactive component as the actual feature and what needs access to that feature. How should we put that? Features, controller is the perfect term. As controllers, they represent a bigger piece of UI. They represent a bigger piece of UI, often the whole application, where state and management of that state needs to be accessible by many components, many nested components. Not necessarily many, but to be accessible by nested components. They represent a bigger piece of UI, often the whole application, but could be as small as a form or a highly interactive list. The common requirement here is that the state and management of that state needs to be accessible by nested components. Yeah, in a reactive component, you cannot use hooks. This is because the component initializes in React's commit phase, as opposed to the render phase where hooks are evaluated. But this fact guarantees that the component will mount and unmount with the related. Yeah, I think I want to put this into warning, maybe? Oh my god, it's hot here today for some reason. But this mechanism guarantees that command will mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks, making it yeah, whatever. Think of let's see how this looks. Okay, let us get back to our counter and see how you would normally make it stateful. Blah blah blah. The great thing about hooks is the fact that we can still embrace the components as a function, but that gain can bring with it so much pain as your state management becomes more than just syncing values with the user face inside the same component. That's important, right? Because when you do props passing or, for God's sake, create a context, you start getting into issues. Instead of hooks, okay, let's drop down. Instead of hooks, we're going to bring back an old React API with a new signature. I don't think that we're going to take inspiration from Vue, which and enable us to combine reactive state management with a reconciling UI, with a reconciling user interface. That's enough. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Now the function, now the component. Now the component has a reactive scope where we do state management. which returns as a reactive scope where we do state management. State management and return a reconciling scope where we describe the user interface. Now the component has a reactive scope where we do state management. And oh, this is so shitty. I don't have the rhythm in me today. Now the component has a reactive scope where we do state management. Okay. And reconcile scope. I don't have to describe their relationship. You see it in the code. And a reconciling scope where we describe it. The reactive scope runs once when the component initializes. The return function for the user interface will run every time the observed state and or props change. Okay, that's good. I don't want to call this a warning. I want to call it info. In a reactive component, you cannot use hooks. This is because the component initializes in React's commit phase as opposed to the render phase, where hooks are evaluated. But this mechanism guarantees that the component will mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks, enabling your intuitive programming mind to write state manner that scales, enabling your intuition how should we put this? But this mechanism guarantees that the component will mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks, bringing back your intuitive general programming skills to write state management that scales. General intuitive your general bringing back your intuition on how to write state management at scales. I don't want to be like, what's it called? Like, yeah. But this mechanism guarantees that the component will mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks. Like, the point isn't really that we guarantee the mount and the unmount. It's also because with that, you can just like inline, as I showed in the previous page, like you can just write, you can instantiate classes, set intervals, anything you want, because it will mount and it will also unmount so that you can dispose of those things. Guarantees that the component will mount and unmount, allowing you to just write code as normal again. That's what I mean. To express state management as normal again. That's what we're doing. We just want you to express state management. Like that's why you go with these global solutions. It's because you can just write the state management. You don't have to bring in this reconciling behavior on top of everything and parse and understand and bend your mind and squeeze your mental models of how to write state management into these concepts. I'm going to change this, but I just had to get it out. Think of reactive components as controllers. They represent a bigger piece of UI, often the whole application. They represent a bigger piece of UI, like the whole application, or a page, like the whole application or a page, but could be as small as a form or a highly interactive list. The common requirement here is that the state management needs to be accessible by nested components. Yeah, by nested components. That's fine. Okay, I want to go. By the way, I have to check my time here. Just 2 seconds. Okay. Oh, sorry. I forgot to check what I was actually going to check. Yeah. So let's summarize this. So going reactive. The two challenges with React we're trying to solve is performance and mental overhead. It's not the mental overhead. It's like it's more critical than that. It's not like they're adding some fluff. Like it's breaking our intuition on how the code executes. That's the point. The two challenges we're trying to solve is yeah, I need to find like a nice way to wrap mental overhead into something more specific. Like it's about how the code executes. And it's more like brain melting than anything else. Anyways, since performance is something we implicitly Since performance is something we implicitly gain by doing reactive state management, let us rather focus on how we write and think reactive state management. The simplest example of state management is a counter. Blah, blah, blah. If we were to express this in React, we would blah, 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 very much the same. Even though this code looks the same, it executes very differently. Right. It does not execute the same. In React, the counter is called every time the component potentially needs to reconcile. In reactive code, the counter is only called once when the component initializes. That means you avoid the overhead of how useState and setCount behaves in this special runtime of reconciliation. The complexity increases as you start managing side effects. Here showing the reactive code. Where we just immediately we set the interval, and when it unmounts, we clear the interval. And with React, you're suddenly doing all of this stuff. And the point is, what we wanted to express is an interval that is created when the component mounts. The interval updates the count every second and is cleared when the component unmounts. With reactive code, we can express exactly that. But in React, there is no such thing as mount and unmount. The reason is it's concurrent rendering. You just have a generic use effect. You have to try. You try to squeeze your mental model into. Also changing how to use. You try to squeeze your mental into. We also have to consider how to access the current count in this context as it is stale. Yeah, right? So first of all, you can't just create the interval, right? You have to know that you need to use this special hook called use effect. And there you can create the interval. But there's nothing here expressing that this should happen when you mount, right? We know that, like with useEffect, that, okay, this will happen as you mount, but it's because of this dependency array, right? But even that's not quite true because of strict mode. And then we return here, which is basically unmount, but not really unmount. It's just whenever the useEffect runs again. And then we have to know here that, oh, the count can't access the count here, so we have to use the callback instead. Or we could pass count in here, but then the interval would restart every time we change the count. So it's like, it's just insane. Let us continue by creating an instance of something as the component mounts and then dispose of it. Oh my god, I'm not my writing today. Let us continue by creating an instance of something. When the component mounts, and then comma, and then dispose of it when the component unmounts. So here we can just create the class, and when we unmount, and that's guaranteed to run, we can dispose of it. With React, this is the closest we get. So we have a use state. We need to use a callback now, or we would create it every time this reconciles. We need to destructure it, and then we need to use a useEffect where we return a function that only the disposer to dispose of it. But this does not actually work in React. The reason is concurrent mode. This component might initialize and be disposed by React without running the effects. Also, during strict mode, the use state is called twice. That means you have a leak. This makes perfect sense to enable concurrent mode for optimizing updates to the UI, but it completely melts your brain doing state management. The value proposition of Impact is that you will keep the reconciling model to express user interfaces. What makes React so great in the first place? For state management, you will rather use a reactive model which gives you performance out of the box and keeps you sane expressing complex state management. Reactive components. Let us get back to our counter and see how you would normally make it stateful. The great thing about hooks is the fact that we can still embrace the components as a function, but that gain can bring with it so much pain as your state management becomes more than just syncing values with the user interface inside the same component. Instead of hooks, we're going to take inspiration from Vue and enable us to combine reactive state management with a reconciling user interface. Yeah, it's exactly what we're doing. Yeah, and enable us to combine reactive blah, blah, blah. So here we have create component. Now the component has a reactive scope where we do state management and a reconciling scope where we describe the user interface. The reactive scope runs once when the component initializes. The return function for the user interface will run every time the observed state and or props change. In a reactive component, you cannot use hooks. This is because the component initializes in React's commit phase as opposed to the render phase where hooks are evaluated. But this mechanism guarantees that the component will mount and unmount with the related lifecycle hooks, allowing you to just express state management as normal. This makes perfect sense to enable concurrent mode. Where was it? With the allowing you with the think of it as brain melting prevention. Oh, and then reactive components are used very much like controllers in older UI frameworks. They represent a bigger piece of UI, like the whole application or a page, but could be as small as a form or a highly interactive list. The common requirement here is that the state and management needs to be accessible by nested components. Yeah, that's it. That's an improvement. And then reactive prop. With impact, the props passed to a reactive component becomes reactive. That means you can use the props with reactive primitives like computing state or running effects, but you can also use them directly in your user interface as you're used to, where the user interface reconciles when the prop changes. Because the props are reactive, you cannot destructure them. The reason is that each key is a getter to the underlying observable prop. The children prop is a plain getter accessing the current children. So again, we are taking some props here and we're just using it with a derived here, or like if you use MobX, you have like a computed and it's almost like I really like the signals, impact signals, especially with first class promise support and query and mutation and all of that, but it's so appealing to use MobX, just writing mutation code as if you don't care. It's very interesting. Yeah, and that's basically reactive props. And then we have lifecycle. An important part of state management is to know when the component mounts and when it unmounts. Impact allows you to hook into these lifecycle hooks to clean up or execute state changes as the DOM is mounted. On will unmount, blah, blah, blah. Since our reactive context is just a function scope, we're free to do state management beyond just the state we expose to the user interface. In this case, we run an interval for as long as the counter is mounted. But this could have been a subscription or some instance you need to dispose of when the component unmounts. Oh, so this actually isn't true anymore. Let's see. So we don't actually... Yeah, this is nice. Like, we don't care about this anymore. Oh, that's nice. Because now, like previously, with Impact, we would run the state management as part of the render phase, which means it's in it might be affected by a nested component throwing an error or throwing a promise, or like a start transition, or like whatever that like triggers the possibility of the rendered component tree to be disposed of. But this isn't the case anymore, because we guarantee like the only way that the nested components of a reactive component can render is if the reactive component has gotten to the commit phase. I should probably write about that somewhere, how it makes that guarantee, and like the render phase and the commit phase, and how they differ, and how it adds that overhead, like it has a blocking nature to the commit phase. But it's so small. Like with any like abstraction or change, you will introduce some overhead. But this does not affect rendering at all in terms of user experience. And you will just gain a shit ton by using reactive primitives instead. Okay, so scaling up, Impact enables a progressive scaling of state management. By default, you can inline your state management with the user interface. But as it grows, you can move the state management out to its own function. So we create state instead, and we return read-only controlled version of that state, and we use that instead. But with state complexity, you often also have user interface complexity. You want to avoid passing all your state as props, but rather just make it available to any nested component. Normally in this situation, you have to reorganize your components to provide it through a React context, also risking performance issues. Or move to a global reactive paradigm with new primitives. With the impact, you can naturally progress by exposing the state to any nested components as well. So this is why we have create provider. You just create a provider for the state you want to expose. You export the hook, and then you just say provide counter. The use counter can be used in any reactive state management scope of a component or in any traditional component. So if you were to use the counter state in a reactive component, you can do that here. Or any other normal React component can use counter to access the state. I guess the only thing we have to mention here is that with the other React components, you have to use an observer. I wish there was a way we could handle that, because make it more accessible, because now you have to remember to both use the, well, you don't have to remember to use the counter, but you have to remember to have an observer. But what's interesting is that this create component is configured specifically for the reactive primitives you're using. And we already have the observer to manage this thing. And we could actually, well, that's the thing. Like, I wonder why is, so for example, let me check it. So for example, Mobex. Oops. Mobex. It has a package called Mobex React Lite, and that thing has an observer. But it's so complicated. I wonder why it's so insanely complicated. So, well, some of it is typing, which is fine. Oh yeah, that's fine. On the front wrapped in either another or React Mobile. Oh, interesting. They do that. But what I think is that is using static rendering. What the hell is that? Return-based component. Oh, so this would be like server side. So what I'm thinking is that we could have a general implementation of this observer component. A lot of this is legacy. Copy static properties. Why? Oh, yeah, but we're building this for TypeScript. You know what? I think we're going to try something. We're going to allow you to... so when you... How we're going to do this? Okay, let's play with it first. So what we can do, what I'm thinking about here is... okay, we're gonna stream for another hour at least, I think. Anyway, so what we can do is when I have some nested component, so count, and it's gonna show the count, and then we have like h1 count, silly thing. Oh, now what I was thinking is this thing called provide counter and then inject counter would maybe be a better. We could make this a higher order component instead. And the reason is that you will now say count, inject counter, and then you would just get it on the props. And it would do the same. It will memo the component because it's an observing component. The problem is, what if it also needed access to what if it also needed access to like the app, for example, inject app? Then you have to do like compose inject app. Like then it starts to get a little bit weird. Oh, it's so hot in here. Oh my god. Let's see. Yeah, it's very interesting because the only way you can actually consume anything from a reactive component is to use this thing. And it gives us an opportunity to normalize observation in components. And we have access to the actual observing primitive of the related reactive library, it being MobX or Signals or whatever. I do wish there was a way to just do this, of course. So instead of doing this, we would do counter equals inject counter, but this isn't enough to do observation. It just isn't. And you won't memo the thing, which is also an optimization that happens. Because they should be memo when they're observing. So I think this makes a lot of sense. And there's also the thing like, what if you want props as well? So what if it needed some external prop? How would you express that? Then you would kind of have to split it up so you would have props, but then you would probably need to do something like that. Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it would make it more accessible for sure. Like you don't have to install like MobX React Lite. Well, okay, maybe this is a problem because, well, no, not really, because we can normalize everything. So you can have like an observer. Oh yeah, but that's a problem. Like, what if you want an yeah, maybe we shouldn't do this. No, I don't think we should do this. But that's the thing. You have to add, just like when you're using MobX or something else, you actually have to add observation to the components that's doing observation. But we should add that. Scaling up. Info. React components that uses the use counter will need to use the observer, needs to add observation from the related reactive React package. Like that would be MobX React Lite or whatever. The reason we don't use that observer inside the reactor component is that we don't want to have a nested component. But maybe we could. Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, maybe we can do this. What if we just do that? Impact React component. So here we have, we can just make this whole thing. We don't need memo. We're just going to use observer. Yes, we make this the observer. Yes, that makes so much more sense. That simplifies it a ton. So let's try that. So what we would do here is React node. Yeah, what's the signature for this? So we would have something like T props T, and that returns, well, basically T extends function component, and then it just returns T. That's the whole point of observer. It's the exact same thing it returns. So what we can do here instead is we can just say observer like this. And I'm not sure why it's complaining. But what happens now is that we don't need to do any of this manual observer stuff. So we can remove force. Let's see, let's try to remove force render, see what happens. So we're not gonna have UI disposer ref either. Parent reactor component, blah, 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 blah. So we're not gonna have this thing. I think that's the only thing. Oh, let's see what happens. So we're gonna remove render UI. So this is just gonna, yeah, we don't even need render UI. We can just return the thing. Okay, we can still do this though. So result is render, and then it might add the context provider, but that's basically it. I'm not sure why this oh yeah, just needs that thing, and then we don't need to dispose of the UI thing because that happens when the component let's just ignore that. Okay, so we're gonna try something now. We're gonna build this. Well, let's go and stop. We need to run that. Let's create another one. So impact React component, your build. And let's see. And then we have MobX, but currently MobX doesn't have, I think I removed MobX React Lite. No, it's there, okay. So we're gonna put import observer from MobX React Lite. Like that instead, and then we're gonna build it, and then we're gonna see if it actually works. Dev. Let's see. Localhost 3000. That definitely would simplify it. Yeah. Nice. That's great. I'm just gonna review one thing. So when do we run component setup or configure component? No, what did I call it? Oh, there we have it. So we call this thinking. Okay, so the thing I wonder is if we didn't do server-side rendering, we would run use layout effect, configure component, but it wouldn't actually render the component. That's the thing. We have to force it to do that. Yeah. So like it's very easy to do it, but should we just use a count, or we could actually use let's just do const as, yeah, we don't even need this, set lazy loaded use state. Yeah, so this will never be set during server-side rendering, because we'll immediately just render and like execute everything because we know it's gonna mount because it's already been mounted. And then we're gonna specifically here, after we configure the component, we're gonna set lazy loaded true, which is gonna trigger the re-render and everything will be nice. That's good. So now we rather rely on the observer of the actual thing. I wonder if Preact has this. It will be sad if Preact didn't have this. Preact signals React. I think that's kind of a common thing. You kind of need that. How does it? Oh, I think. Oh, wait. I think maybe they have. Yeah, but that's fine. That is fine. We can just. It doesn't matter. It's a little bit different, I think, because they use. Where is it? Building the UI. Oh, I don't think they even have. They like they're crazy. They just hook into the React. Like they, to put it lightly, they they import "don't use this or you'll be fired" approach. But I do think they have like a use observer, like to manually do the observation. Signal compute effect. I thought they had. Let's look at the package. Oh, I can click it. React integration. So, yeah, so you use like, yeah, they even have like a transform. Yeah, so you have use signals. If you can't use a bubble transform, you can directly call the use signals hook. Yeah, so we're going to use that. But it's a very simple thing. So let's update. So for React signals, there's an observer. And we should put a memo around this. Memo. We want to do the same. Memo from React. Why are you complaining? What does this do? Props T. Do I have to change function component? Well, I guess we can just do a T extends function component any, and then we do. Yeah, this is like. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Memo props fine. Let's see if we can get that running. So this would be impact React signals, build. And oh. Oh, sorry. This should be observer. That's fine. Observer, and now in dev, do we have the dev thing here? Let's see. I don't think I actually mount the signals example, but let's do that now and then see if everything works. There's probably. Yeah, but this should be fine. Create. Yeah, I want to do it down here, but That's weird. Why did it say that? Cannot call. It is because of server-side rendering. Why does it say that? Cannot call provide outside the reactive context. Okay, let's look at the code. I don't think I actually tested this. Create provider. So what we do, we provide, we're getting the resolved. So this is weird, right? Because we're getting the resolving context container. And we're pushing this when we run the, oh, I don't think, oh, yeah, sorry. UI ref, we run setup somewhere else as well. We do it here. Yeah, sorry. So this also needs to do. Boop. Good thing I had next as an example here. Let's see. UI. Like so, and then we're gonna return the UI. Let's build it. There we go. Yeah, and this even has optimistic. Bloop. Nice. That's working. And then we can do the same for the others. I just wanted to verify the implementation. So where are we at now, really? Reactive React. Progressive state management. It's true. It's progressive. Yeah. I guess that's fine. And then learn. Going reactive, reactive components, life cycle. Scaling up. Fine. In summary. Does it need in summary? Yeah. I think this is fine. I think this is fine. Let's drop in summary. Delete. Delete. The thing I worry about is like the long journey that took us to this specific signature, and it does not make immediate sense why it has this signature. So if I were to put this like back on the front page, it would not make immediate sense why it has a signature. And that's the problem with like complexity. It's like it's very hard to explain the benefit of like technical choices with a counter. And just doing that, someone might misunderstand the point of these reactive components. They're there for like larger pieces of UI. They're not there for a counter. You would never do it for like a counter. Or like if that is the feature of your app, of course you can do it. And I guess that's also the thing. It's like like if you have a to-do application, like you just have one reactive component and maybe you just implement the whole interface in that. That's perfectly fine. And that's kind of what is a progressive progressive state management promises. It's like, okay, you might start with a reactive component defining the state of the to-dos and everything. And then you can put the whole UI in there. But then maybe you want to split up the components. You create these like normal components, splitting up the UI. And maybe you just pass props, right? That's fine. Or you can choose to provide the state of the to-dos to any nested component. But then you have to add an observation to them. But they'll be more optimized, right? Because they'll be memoed and yeah, basically highly optimized. And then maybe you develop like some kind of crazy footer feature that needs its own state management. And then you just do that. And if that for some reason needs access to the to-dos, it has access to the to-dos. Yeah. I think the thing that's bothering me is that it's so simple. It's like, it's just... Or the thing that's bothering me is that it just looks like complicating a component. That's what it looks like, right? Because we're adding this wrapped function scope over the normal component. And so it just looks like we're making it more complicated, I think. Or it's hard for me to say. But then you can take like some other global state management. Well, yeah, in that sense, it's much simpler. And I guess that maybe that is the thing. It's like it's so... Or the thing I worry about is that people look at the example and they think that that's how they're going to define all their components. But that's not the case. it's a very minimal set of components that will be reactive components, because they can manage a lot of state without any performance issues. That's the thing. So I'm not sure if I like the name create component. I would prefer like create controller component or something like that, because that's what then then it's like, what does this component actually represent? And it's a controller. Yeah, something to reflect on for sure. But what I want to do now, what do I want to do now? I guess we should just update the API documentation, because everything is kind of in a okay state, especially specifically for impact signal, simple data fetching. Yeah, so we need to change this as well. But yeah, create component. So there's one kind of thing I want to highlight, is like these components having state, it could be defined in a different way. And Vue, I think, kind of got the signature. Like that's how it would have to be defined if you were going to do that. But yeah. Another thing I'm thinking about is when it's passing props, we're now using an effect to... Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, no, that's not an actual problem. Like, I think I would want these... ideally, like, when we use memo... like, when should the props update? Like, when should we trigger props? And it should really be... It should not be in the render phase. Definitely, because that would trigger another render and that would be bad. But now we don't... Now it will do a render first and reconcile, and then we trigger the props. That will do another render, the way it's implemented now. So if you have a prop changing, you will have a double render. Maybe we should change that. Let's see. So the point here is when we're down here, this is SSR. We have render UI ref current. It's gonna render whenever the props change. But we don't really want that. I wonder what happens if you return. I would imagine like the reconciler would first check if the component returns the exact same value as before. Because what I think should really happen here is that we need to control what is actually being returned. So there should be this is actually a render ref. So this is the function that does the rendering. And then I think we need a UI ref, which is the last rendered result. And we control when that should trigger again, right? So when there's a props change, it will just return, yeah, const UI ref equals user. And we need to comment the hell out of this, but I'm not in no mood to do it now. So basically, whenever we call render UI, what we want to do, we want to say current equals render. And we'll just return that. And then we're not actually going to call we're going to return UI ref current, and UI ref current should start out as null. Oh, it does. Okay. So when we actually yeah, this is how we want to do it. So when we render, we're just going to render, right? And then whenever there's, wait a minute, but now it's, so that means when the props change, well, we wouldn't have an actual UI issue though, because we update the props in the layout effect, so we'll just reconcile again. So we would rather kind of, yeah, so this is the thing. We can't have like a UI ref. This will rather be, or we would have to delete, that's the thing. We would have to delete the UI ref. Yeah, so if the UI ref is undefined, it means that you should go and update it. But if it's defined, oh, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it. Oh, wait a minute. We still need this one. I don't think it's worth it. Like, if a prop changes, what's gonna happen here is it's gonna render the UI, given that there's an actual prop change, and then it's gonna go through, trigger the props, and given that you actually use the prop inside the UI, that's going to trigger observation and then do a reconciliation before an actual update of the UI. Yeah, but that's fine. But we're going to comment the hell out of all of this. Yeah, I guess the big question now is, should we call it create component? I guess we should. Yeah, let's call it create component. So let's change create component. What are create component? We have on will unmount, on will unmount. We also have on did mount, on did mount, and we have create provider. I reflected on refs, because oh, create component, because you might want access to an actual ref inside inside your state management, but I'm not sure. Like, if you want access to a DOM element, it's likely that it's a very specific UI thing. So, but this is about like state management. It's not about element stuff. But maybe you have like on mount or on did mount. You want to do something with an element, and how do you get access to that element? It's actually very simple. It's just ref, really, like the same as use ref. But I think that's the only thing, really. Maybe we should explore that, like how to effectively get access to. We're gonna yeah, let's implement that, because like this might sound whimsical, but there's a lot of stuff I try to do one consideration at a time, but I kind of have in my head everything that needs to be done. So, but now we don't need a blockable dispatcher anymore, because now this is so nice, because we basically removed the possibility to use hooks. Let's see. I guess one thing is like if you do server-side rendering, then you oh, this is interesting. So if you do server-side rendering, it will immediately render the UI, which means that it will evaluate hooks. But then it would start throwing errors after that. I think. Would it? Actually, it wouldn't. Oh, this is interesting, because yeah, maybe we should have the blockable dispatcher. let's see, what do I call it? Blocking dispatcher. So whenever we evaluate the UI, render UI, we're gonna do this const and is it unblock? Yeah, well, and we have to let result any if is production result is just render, else we're gonna use the blocker thingy and unblock. So that whenever you render, we actually block the usage of the React dispatcher, which is a mechanism under hooks. It's just helpful so that you don't use hooks in that render function. I don't imagine that you would feel comfortable doing it anyways, but yeah. And then we have the ref thingy, and ref is really just export function ref, and I'm not sure the actual implementation in React. I think it has like multiple things. But when you return a ref, well, let's first look at it. How does a ref look like? So we need to go into our render thingy, or our demo thingy. Let's use signals. What were we doing? Yeah, we're gonna look at ref, and I think if you create a function here, you just get the node. So I think a ref is a function with a current property on it. Because if I do node here and we try to render this thing, see this? It's a div. And so what we're gonna do is, it's a very simple mechanism. It's just ref, and then this would be t extends HTML element. And then we're gonna create a ref function, and that ref function is gonna have a current, which is gonna be well, it's gonna be undefined. Well, maybe null. Is it null? Does this start as null? I think it does. So what we're gonna do is return this ref function, and this is gonna actually take the HTML element, and then we're gonna say ref function dot current equals node, and this might be null. That's the thing, or null. Yeah, as t or null. This is it. I feel very confident about. So if we would want our node to be up in here, we would do div equals ref HTML div element, and we could, oh yeah, we should, we need to fix all the packages. Let's say impact react signals, because it re-exports everything on did mount, on will mount. Yeah, and we actually haven't implemented on we haven't actually implemented the on did mount. We have to do that as well. Maybe we can do that after this. Yeah, let's just go and clean up stuff. So we have a ref, and now we should be able to like set timeout. 1 second. And we should be able to do div console.log guts the div div.current. Now the question is if this should be actually be reactive, right? Or if it just be a reference. So let's do div here. And then guts the div. And here we have the div. And when it unmounts, I firmly believe the ref will set it to null. But it's interesting that we can make it reactive. But doing so, like that, yeah. We don't have like a primitive for that. Yeah, it's interesting because I think you would want it to be reactive, right? So you would kind of have effect div.current if div.current. You would do something. But we can't make that reactive. Unless we actually give it the, and the thing is you import ref from yeah. But maybe a better way to do it is like so you would just do like a function and then you would just set it, right? Basically, yeah. So what you would do instead, if you wanted to do this, you would have div, which in this case will be a signal of HTML div element or null, and then it starts out as null, and then you would function set div, and that would be node HTML div element or null, and then you would do div, oh sorry, div set div. Oh, interesting. Oh, you could just do this. Wait, why doesn't that work? Oh, void or undefined only. But isn't this a function? Why doesn't this work? Isn't that the signature? Why did the other signature work? Because that's basically doing the same thing. Is it because it doesn't have a current? I wonder. Because ultimately a ref is just a function. that gets called with the element or null. What if I do any here? Type null isn't type void. Huh. Why doesn't that work? Oh, it's because... Oh, I think it's because it can be a callback. Ah, that kind of sucks. So we will kind of have to function set the ref and then again do like element or null. Node HTML div element or null. And then you will kind of do set div ref, and that works. Okay, so because it has the update signature, but that's kind of weird because it's like an extension. But maybe the ref also supports, like what legacy ref? Oh, legacy. Why does it have... Why do they call it legacy ref? String. So it can be a ref callback. Do not use this or you will be fired. Or ref object. Oh. Yeah, but it won't be reactive. Well, you could... This is just interesting to explore. Like what we could do here is... Yeah. No, how would we do this? Yeah, no, this is... Yeah, but that kind of sucks. Like you have to... It would be nice to make it reactive, but I don't know how to make it generically reactive. But you could like... Yeah, I guess what you could also do is like... oops. Node set div. But this is the thing I don't understand. Why can you do this? Oh, interesting. Oh, sorry. Oh, it's because it returns a value. It shouldn't return anything. That's the problem. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, but I think this is fine, right? Then you have a reactive div and you can do stuff when it changes. Like it would be nice to just do set div, but it needs to return void. And currently the set thing returns the actual value you're setting. But maybe we shouldn't do that because a setter doesn't have, like if you assign a value in JavaScript, it doesn't return the value. We're going to change that. And then we're going to make this. I don't think that actually makes sense. So signal set function signal create signal promise, blah 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 blah. We're just going to return Value equals new value, promise resolve. We're not gonna return the value. We're just gonna, oh, no, this is the actual getter, so that should return the value. Cool. I guess that's it. So I think this is like the value proposition for, oh fuck, why didn't that work? Oh, didn't that, did it have, yeah, signal T. This should just be void. Yeah, sorry. Build. What the fuck? Oh, okay. Cons new promise. Oh, sorry. Current promise equals. Why is this failing? Oh, okay, interesting. The reason we have a return type there is when you set a promise, it becomes observable. So if you want to keep a reference to that observable promise, you have to set the promise and it returns it. Yeah, no, we can't change this actually. This is more important. Okay. But yeah, we definitely don't need a ref. That's for sure. Impact React component. Did I actually remove it again? No, we still have the ref there. Let's drop that. Okay. So we wanted to add didn't we build it again? Oh, it still fails. Oh, didn't I fix it? Oh, come on. There we go. Now this had an error. Oh. There we go. Let's fix the unmounted thing. What the fuck? Ref, sorry. Impact React signals. So we have something called register onMount. Oh, do we have it? Yeah, but we don't have unmount. We have. Let's rename this. Rename on will unmount. And then we have will unmount. And then we would have did mount. And that would basically, let's not call it cleaner. It's just a callback for God's sake. And then we have on will, on mount. Let's call that rename on did mount. And then we need to call this. So where do we call on will and mount? Hello. Oh, will and mount. Wait, are we not calling it anywhere? That's weird. We need to call that. Oh, will unmount. And then the question now is, where do we actually wait a minute, how is this gonna work? Where do we, so we configure component, where's SSR? SSR. SSR, yeah, no configure component, but when we are hydrating, we are configuring the component. Okay, and then we render the UI, fine. And then we have use layout effect with props, use layout effect. So if we have, this is the thing, when do we actually trigger? When do we trigger did mount? So this won't actually run when we come from the server. This is interesting because we have configure component. So we do configure component, and configure component will run the setup, create a UI ref, but this needs to trigger a render. Oh, sorry, it does that. Set lazy loaded true. So I think we need another use layout effect. Well, a use effect for this. So what that use effect is going to evaluate is when have we mounted the UI? It's when use effect is lazy. What do we call it? Lazy loaded. Oh, I'm not exposing it. So we have lazy loaded. So this use effect, let's first run it for fucking service side rendering. So if lazy loaded, we're gonna trigger mounted did mount. If lazy loaded, that's a definite like did mount. But then we have if it's hydrated, and this thing, let's see. Yeah, let's make this a const. Let's move up here. Const is hydrating equals boolean. So if is hydrating, we're going to configure the component, render the UI, and then again we're going to have, where's the use effect? Here we go. So if you're, the funny thing about is hydrating is that this isn't like something that like triggers a reconciliation, But if we are hydrating, that thing is going to be true when that use effect runs. And then on the next reconciliations, it's going to be false. So I think we can just say is hydrating. Then we are mounted. I think that's how we're going to do this. So we can, I guess, kind of test it. So let's whatever. So on mounted on did mount console.log. I mounted div. Yeah. Oh. Wait, isn't it the actual div? Oh, sorry. It's signals. Yeah. Nice. Cool. Now that's in place. What's missing? What's missing? We need to fix the rest of the packages. Let's do that first. Let's fix the packages. So that would be, let's just start with legend. So this should not take observe. We should actually, oh, that's interesting that it even works. We need to get legend state. We need the React package thingy. Oh, interesting. They have two-way bindings. Get started. Yeah, this is the thing we want. Oh, fuck. That doesn't fit with the... That doesn't make sense. Why doesn't that... impact React component. Do we have that as a dependency? No. What's it called? Legend. Oh, it's just slash React. Okay. Why doesn't that signature fit? Tie is not a sum of FC. FC any is not assignable to type T. Okay, let's try to just, we don't really care about like the exact signature because it's just a function. So what we're gonna do, where are we at? Observer, it's gonna be T extends. It's just a function, right? Let's just do args. Any? Wait, how the hell do I? How do I type? I forgot how I typed this. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, args. Oh, sorry. That's how you type it. Does this help? It did. No, it didn't. Why doesn't that work? Type FCN is not assignable to type T. What the fuck is FC? FC. Why doesn't that? An FC? Are you some kind of special? It's function component. Does it have its own React reference? You know what? Let's move back to. Oh, sorry. It's because I use any? What's P here? Oh, React create component P. What the fuck? But P could be essential. For fuck's sake. I don't really care about this. Oh, come on. Fucking constraints. Isn't that what function component P? Oh, this is annoying. Why do we get this type issue? But could we just do, wait a minute, if we do this again, T extends, and then we do function component T, and then we return function component T. Would you be happy with this? Why are you so unhappy? Well, now it's fine. Okay, great. That should be it. Let's build it. Impact React Legend, yarn build. And what we're gonna do is just check that it works. So we have Legend. Oh, by the way, Legend needs to export all the things. Oh, come on. Impact React Legend. On did mount, on will, and mount, create provider. That's all. Oh, what about create component? Oh, of course. My bad. Okay, so let's bring in Legend. Let's just bring in Preact at the same time. I'm gonna fix Preact as well. Let's see, Legend example. Legend, yeah, so that should just work. The same for Preact, except that we have to build it. Impact React Preact. So it's missing what was it? Preact guide. Preact signals, how to use it with React. Preact signals React. Like, are these? Yeah, these are pair dependencies. Preact signals React. Preact signals React. Import use observer from Preact signals React. So this one's a little bit different. So we're getting the actual component here. And basically what we need to do is like use observer and return comp. I think. No, sorry. We need to return. Do we? Use observer takes the component. No, it should. No, sorry. Yes. Return. Return. Okay, so props. Use observer props. This is how it's going to look like. Was it use observer? Oh yeah, because this is the thing. It's not that thing. Signal. And then how do we actually hooks? Oh, use signals. Excuse me. Use signals. There we go. Wait. Why doesn't it have use signals? Preact signals react? Oh, runtime. Interesting. Preact signals react runtime. And we actually don't need core here. Not sure why I had that. All right. We're back with our app. Oh, I haven't installed it in the dev thing. Okay, let's just install it. Yarn add preact signals react. Oh, and then there's an okay. Don't save. There you go. Okay, so signals. Hello, Mobex, Preact, and Legend. Hey, they all work. Nice. Okay, nice. Then that's running. So we can actually start publishing these packages and try things out. So what we're gonna close with here is, let's drop that one. Let's do create component, create provider, on will, unmount, and on did mount. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And this is signals API, impact API, create component. Okay. So learn guides. So we don't have cleanup. We don't have context. Oh, wait a minute. What do we have? So these signal derived effect observer square mutation. Yeah. So this would be rename create component. Derived effect mutation observer query signal. Yeah, and then this needs to be I think I'm gonna just move this into like a medium post. Sign in. Right. Oh yeah, fuck, I remember this. You don't have code examples, right? Medium add code examples. You know, maybe I should write this on leave. Dev.io, is that the thing? Dev2? I have an account there as well. Create post. Preview. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's just do it there. I just need to get all of this stuff off my brain. Say draft. Nice. Oh, the title. What if React was reactive? There we go. Nice. Create compo. Didn't I? Oh. Are these like how do I name these? No, those should be like create component. And then it's create provider.md. And then it's on will mount.md. And no, I'm messing this up. On will and mount. And new file on will mount. Oh, did mount. God. It's good names. I think they nailed the naming. Okay. On did mount. Like it's self-explanatory, right? It's called when the component has mounted. Function or export default, create component, import create component from, well, it depends. How did I do this? Learn impact. Oh, guides. Create. Oh, come on. Create component. Create components. Create provider. Create provider. On will and mount. On did mount. And then we have this impact API. Oh, create component. All right, on the mount. Impact API. What the fuck? Didn't I change it? I changed it. Why aren't you updating? What the fuck? Oh, this is up there. Okay, sorry, this is the index. My bad. Okay, create component. Oh, this is how I did it. Wait, on did mount. I shouldn't have done it this way. On did mount. On did mount. Is call when a component is mounted. Import create component All right, counter return div h1 count. Well, it doesn't matter. Just return a div on the mount. Also.log. I mounted. It's called when the component has mounted. And then on will unmount. Call when the component will unmount. I will unmount. Clean up some stuff. Nice, nicely nice. Cool. And then we have create component. Why do we have outline deep there and we don't? Outline deep. What's the difference on this page? Oh, I don't think we need that. Yeah, no idea what that was. Create component. Creates a reactive component. If a nested component throws an error. Okay, so we don't need these tips anymore. Export default, create component. Counter, return div. My reactive state management goes here. Yeah, and now we don't have to do all of this. Resolving reactive context. You don't really care about this anymore. Maybe you do. But we can move this to the provider thingy, create provider, because this is where it kind of, you might have a technical tickle of how is it possible to provide the state both to the state management scope and any component. Create a reactive component. A reactive component is guaranteed to mount and unmount. It will a reactive component will only initialize will initialize in the commit phase of React to guarantee being mounted and unmounted. Think of the component more as a state management component than a UI component, meaning you will use these components more as controllers in your application to efficiently share state with its immediate UI and any nested components. Warning, you cannot use hooks in reactive components. Let's put it underneath. Cool. I guess that's it. And then create provider. Oh, I'm getting tired. We're gonna write create provider from reactive components. Create provider provides the state of a reactive component to any nested reactive any nested components, reactive or not. Create component. The returned share state with its immediate UI and any nested components. The returned UI is automatically observed. You know what? Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should actually like do observer, because you might not want this. Maybe you just want to return the children, right? You just want some state management and you just return props children. And in that case, you don't need an observer. And then we remove that dependency. But still, it's nice to just be able to do it. It's something to decide on. The return is automatically observed. But yeah, we might want to, maybe we shouldn't actually use the package. Maybe we should do what we used to do. Like the React package, because that's like another peer dependency. But at the same time, it's nice that it acts. But still, like we want it to memo and all of this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, let's just think about that. Create provider. Provides the state of to any nested components, reactive or not. So let's grab some code. Let's do like a actual counter here. Const state equals reactive count. Point here is really that you just do const provide counter use counter, and then you export use counter, and you do create provider. Type state equals count. Oh, number. So we do state, and then use counter, and here you basically just provide counter state. Yeah, and then nested component function nested component would be counter equals use counter return div or h1 count is counter.count, something like that. The only thing is that this needs to be observed. So a nested component equals observer. Oh my god. Yeah, but with like Preact, you wouldn't necessarily have to do this because they use the bubble thing, or you would use signals. Or with impact, you would do. Let's just do this and comment it. needs to be an observer. But just so the core feature of Impact is the ability to resolve state from reactive components. You provide a reactive this is not much different from consuming a regular React a feature of Impact is the ability to resolve state from is to provide state from a reactive. Well, you might have a technical itch on understanding how. Oh my god. I bet it. So you might have a technical itch on this is bad timing, Petter. I'm writing documentation and you're probably gonna cry proofreading this because like I know you have to proofread it. We might have a technical itch on understanding how reactive components can provide state. How React is able to do this. How it works. Yeah, let's drop the whole thing. Can be used inside that to also resolve. Okay, great. Hopefully this behavior is an intuitive developer experience, but to scratch your technical itch, let us take on a concrete example by looking at the simplified component tree. Okay, so now we don't need all this stuff. We can do this. Yeah, other fint, but each reactive component in this tree has its own reactive context container instance that is provided down the component tree using React context given that it provides state. This reactor instance is also passed to the parent reactive context container from up the component tree using the React context. That means reactive context containers represents the same hierarchy of context as the React context itself. So when a reactive component, when a provided state hook is used inside feature, it will use context to find the closest reactive context container, which comes from feature store provider. This reactive context container instance has parent property, blah, 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 referencing their own admin page, which has a parent property referencing on app. With this in mind, we can now explain step by step what happens when the feature component uses to gain access to users. We first from features using it, we call, what the hell was that? Okay, I don't think I'm able to completely what we need to test before actually publishing is the final thing, and that is this stuff, like actually consuming provided state. And I also want to test the props. Is it actually working? And then we're gonna publish it. So I actually got meetings back to back the rest of the day. So we're gonna tackle this tomorrow. Yeah, we're gonna tackle this tomorrow. Yeah, I'm exhausted. At least we're gonna commit it. Git and lots of stuff. Okay. That's it for now. Bye.